That night turned into the most intense and gripping experience I had ever encountered. A serene calm blanketed the Friday evening when it all unfolded. Lying on my back, I gazed intently at the intricate patterns the moonlight cast on the ceiling. My mind buzzed with scattered, racing thoughts, and a profound loneliness settled over me as I realized my husband, Henry, would be away for work for the next 2 months. 3 weeks had already slipped by since I last saw him. At that precise moment, a faint creak of the door shifting alerted me that I wasn't alone. I leaned forward gently, my eyes half closed, and caught sight of a graceful silhouette standing at the doorway, framed by the faint glow from the hall. In the corridor stood my 19-year-old son, Alex, his broad shoulders highlighted under the soft light. He clutched the doorframe as if it were his only anchor, hesitating. In a voice laced with uncertainty, he murmured, "Mom!" Rubbing my eyes, my heart skipped a beat at the sound of his voice. I asked Alex what was troubling him. He fell silent immediately, standing still as his shadow stretched across the room. Finally, he stepped inside, the gentle patter of his bare feet echoing softly on the carpet. His movements were tentative, almost fearful, creating a heavy atmosphere in the room. In a quiet voice, he admitted he couldn't sleep. I glanced at the clock on the bedside table. It read 2:14 a.m. Alex rarely woke me unless something genuinely weighed on him. As I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, a tightness gripped my chest, urging me to reach out to him. I gently asked what was going on. Before sitting on the bed's edge, he hesitated again, his posture stiff, hands clasped tightly in his lap. I watched him for a moment, waiting, but he kept his gaze fixed on the floor. The tension radiating from him was palpable. Kindly, I asked if he felt ready to talk with me, assuring him, "I'll always be here, no matter what." A trembling whisper escaped his lips as he fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. At last, he confessed, "It's hard to explain. Lately, I've been feeling things, different emotions, and I don't know how to handle them." His words stirred a deep unease in me. Leaning slightly forward, I kept my voice steady despite the nervous flutter in my stomach, and asked how he was experiencing these changes within himself. In that instant, his eyes met mine with such intensity that it caught me off guard. He asked if I meant a person, someone who's been constantly on his mind, someone unexpected. A fleeting sense of relief washed over me. Perhaps it was a classmate he didn't know how to approach about a sudden crush. Alex had always been reserved about his feelings, bottling them up until they threatened to overflow. Offering a gentle smile, I reassured him everything was okay. "Can you tell me who this person is? Someone from school?" He shook his head, avoiding my gaze, and replied in a barely audible whisper, "No, it's not someone from school." Pressing gently, a strange emotion began to stir in my heart. "Can you share more? We'll face whatever comes together and find a way to work through it." He took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling as if summoning all his courage. When he spoke again, his voice carried a trace of uncertainty. "It's you, Mom. You've always been the one." His words hit me like a tidal wave, stealing my breath. I sat speechless, my mind blank. I scrambled to make sense of what he'd just said, but the weight of the moment left me unsteady. Suddenly, he stood and began pacing the room like a caged animal, running his fingers through his hair, tugging at the strands as if trying to pull his thoughts into the open. "I know it's wrong," he blurted out, "but I can't help it. I've tried for so long to push it away, to ignore it, but it's always there." I studied him closely, my heartbeat pounding so loudly I could barely hear my own thoughts. "Alex, listen to me," I said carefully. "What you're feeling, it's not what you think it is." Through soft sobs, he insisted, "I've come to understand my feelings. I've never felt this way about anyone else. It's not just admiration or a fleeting crush. It's deeper, more complex." My voice broke as I repeated his name. "Alex, you're my son. What you're feeling isn't romantic love, it's something else." With raw emotion, he cried out, "You're the center of my world, Mom. No one else understands me like you do. You're the only one who makes me feel truly valued. How can that not be love?" As I grappled with his words, tears stung my eyes. My little boy, whom I'd protected and loved unconditionally, was expressing feelings I couldn't comprehend or return. Yet, deep inside, something stirred, a realization I hadn't fully grasped before. My life had been running on autopilot, and I hadn't noticed how much had shifted. Before I could respond, a soft knock came from the door. I turned toward the sound, a growing unease settling in. "Who's there?" I called, my voice shaky. The door creaked open, and there stood Mark, my husband. He asked if everything was all right, stepping into the room. Exhausted from his trip, his face softened, either unaware of the tension between Alex and me or choosing to ignore it. I nodded quickly, perhaps too quickly. "We were just talking." Alex shifted awkwardly, offering a strained gesture. "I'm heading to bed now. Good night, Mom. Hope you have a peaceful night." "Night, Dad." Mark barely registered Alex's abrupt exit, perhaps too tired to notice. He bid Alex good night and turned his attention to me. After Alex left and the door closed with a thud, an uneasy silence filled the space between Mark and me. Neither of us knew how to start or acknowledge the unease. I wasn't the same woman who married him, and the weight of that truth felt suffocating. Not wanting to hurt him, but unable to keep silent, I sat on the bed's edge as Mark searched my face for answers. Softly, he asked, "Sarah, is something bothering you?" I whispered that I didn't know where to begin. "It feels like we're living in different worlds. I'm here, but I don't feel like myself." Though his expression remained calm, a flicker of concern crossed his eyes. "Can you tell me what's wrong? Isn't everything as it should be?" I couldn't answer fully. How could I explain that this life wasn't enough, that I craved something deeper, more meaningful? No matter how I phrased it, it felt like a betrayal. Covering my face with my hands, I murmured, "I'm struggling to figure this out." Leaning closer, Mark placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Can we work through this together? Give it time." Yet, despite his words, I wasn't sure time could bridge the gap. Here I was, feeling trapped in a life that no longer felt like mine. I felt so disconnected that I could barely find my footing. I had parted ways with Mark emotionally, and I lay in bed, yearning for the darkness to reveal the answers I so desperately sought. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. I tried to reach out to Mark, to bridge the gap between us, but instead of growing closer, it seemed we were drifting further apart. My thoughts were consumed by a conversation I'd had with Ian, a quiet burden I couldn't shake, no matter how hard I tried to act normal. Deep inside, I knew something was stirring within me. Ian seemed changed in a way that was impossible to ignore. The quiet boy I once knew was gone, replaced by someone distant. His eyes held a flicker of sorrow whenever they met mine. Despite my anxiety, I couldn't find a way to comfort him, or myself. One night, while Mark worked late into the early hours, I was alone at home with Ian. After dinner, I retreated to my room and heard his footsteps pacing the quiet hallways, moving restlessly from one end to the other. I couldn't stop thinking about our earlier conversation. I wanted to help him move forward, but I was so overwhelmed that I couldn't offer the support he needed. Finally, I decided to check on him. I stood in front of his door, hesitating, searching for the right words to say if he wanted to talk. At last, I gave the door a gentle knock. "Ian, can you let me in?" There was a brief pause before he replied, "Sure, Mom. Everything's fine." I opened the door cautiously and found him sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. When I stepped inside, he didn't look up, but the tension in the room was palpable. I asked how he was doing, trying to sound calm even though I felt anything but. He shrugged, slumping as if carrying the weight of his thoughts. "Mom, I'm just lost. I'm trying to figure things out, but I don't understand why everything feels so wrong." I sat beside him, unsure of what to say. With care, I offered, "I know things are tough right now for me and everyone involved." He nodded quietly, still staring at the floor. "All I want is for you to be happy, Mom. I wish you didn't have to feel this way." His words hit me like a tidal wave, stealing my breath. How had we ended up here? How was my son grappling with my own unhappiness? With tenderness, he expressed his hope that I could find joy. "I don't know how to do that," I admitted. "It feels so unfamiliar." Silence filled the room, neither of us willing to break it. Then Ian looked at me, his eyes filled with a captivating mystery that sparked my curiosity. "Have you ever thought about what you truly want, Mom? What makes you happy?" His question caught me off guard. Of course, I thought about it constantly, but finding an answer wasn't easy. How could I tell him I was torn about staying in this marriage? believing everything was fine while feeling a heaviness in my chest. How could I explain that part of me felt stuck, while another part was thrilled at the edge of something entirely new? Taking a deep breath, I felt the overwhelming uncertainty tighten around me. I don't have a clue, I confessed, but I promise I'll do my best to figure it out. I want to do right by myself and by you. Though his face still showed worry, he offered a faint smile of understanding. I couldn't fully read the emotion in his eyes. Always keep us in mind, okay? Don't shut us out, he said. I hugged him tightly, hoping it could anchor me in the storm of confusion and chaos swirling inside. Though I wasn't sure if my choices were right, I knew I had to be honest. In a whisper, I promised I'd always remember him, pouring my emotions into every word. As he returned the embrace, I wondered if things were shifting, if I was drifting away from the person I used to be, unable to stop the transformation. In the weeks that followed, a noticeable tension hung in the air, seeping into every corner of the house. Mark broke from his usual routine, his work, his quiet efforts to reconnect with me. But I began to realize I was slowly convincing myself I no longer recognized who I was becoming, or where I was headed. Conversations with Mark grew more intense, laying bare everything we'd left behind. One night, as Mark prepared dinner in the kitchen, I stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door of my bedroom. For days, I'd been avoiding stillness, unwilling to face the reality of what had happened and what was still unfolding. I felt an increasing obsession with the growing distance between me and those around me. But in that moment, I felt a powerful urge to confront it. Carefully, I turned the doorknob and stepped into the room that used to be my sanctuary. It no longer felt comforting. It seemed ordinary. The silence was deafening. I looked around, noticing the small details that once brought me peace: family photos, books, and little keepsakes we'd collected over the years. In that moment, they felt like relics of a past that no longer seemed familiar. Suddenly, a creak came from the door, and before I could respond, Mark entered the room. His unexpected presence startled me, forcing me to act quickly. With concern in his voice, he asked, "Sarah, what's going on? You've been so distant lately, like you can't find your way back to yourself." I stood there, unable to respond. I wanted to be honest, to address the issues we faced, the disconnect in our marriage, the overwhelming confusion. But the words wouldn't come. I stood frozen, unsure where to begin. In a faint whisper, I said, "I don't know. I can barely hear myself. I'm not sure if I can keep going, Mark. I'm so confused I don't even recognize myself anymore." He stepped closer and gently closed the door, his face calm but etched with worry. In a soft voice, he said, "Sarah, you're not alone in this. We'll get through it together. We've faced tougher things before. This is just a rough patch." But it didn't feel like just a rough patch. It felt like everything we'd built was unraveling, and I didn't know if it could be pieced back together. Worse, I wasn't sure if I even wanted it to be. The uncertainty grew heavier as I questioned my next steps. A gasp escaped me, unstoppable. Mark stepped back, his expression turning more serious. "What did you mean by that? Are you saying you don't want to continue our relationship?" His question pressed down on me, creating a tense, suffocating atmosphere. In that moment, I knew everything was about to change, like the pivotal point in a story with no way back. But my response wasn't clear. I couldn't voice it. Hesitantly, I admitted, "I'm not sure what I want." My voice trembled with anxiety as I questioned whether I was still the person he married. The silence between us was broken only by the house's faint creaks around us. Finally, Mark let out a deep sigh, his shoulders slumping as if carrying a heavy burden. In a quiet voice, he said, "I can't fix this for you, Sarah. It's not my place to decide for you. I can't keep pretending everything's fine. We need to figure out what we want together or apart. This can't go on like this."